The email loaded on my phone while I stood in the parking lot of the leasing office, and my hands went cold before I even finished reading it. Under additional occupant, there was a name I recognized instantly, Derek Voss, my fiancée's ex-boyfriend, added to our rental application 3 days ago, without a single word to me. I called the leasing agent right there in the lot. "I need to withdraw my deposit," I said. She paused. "Sir, are you sure? You'll lose the hold on the unit." I told her I was sure. What I didn't tell her was that I still didn't know why Derek's name was on that lease, or how long Melissa had been planning to explain it away. "My name is Ryan Cole. I'm 31, a structural engineer in Denver, and until that afternoon, I thought I was 6 weeks from moving into a house with the woman I was going to marry." Melissa Turner and I had been together for 3 years. She was 29, worked as an event coordinator for a hotel chain downtown, and she had this way of making ordinary nights feel like something worth remembering. We'd met at a mutual friend's engagement party, and within a year we were talking about buying furniture together like it meant something permanent. I proposed the spring before, on a hike outside Boulder, and she cried so hard she couldn't get the yes out for almost a full minute. We'd been renting a cramped one-bedroom near downtown, and after the engagement we decided it was time to find a real house, something with a yard, something that felt like a beginning. I handled most of the search because my schedule was more flexible, and because, honestly, my credit was better. Melissa had some old debt from a defaulted phone contract years back that she was still working through. It wasn't a big deal to me. I loved her. I figured we'd sort the finances out together, the way people do. One small detail always stuck with me from those years. Every Sunday, no matter how busy we were, Melissa made pancakes shaped badly on purpose, because she said perfect pancakes were suspicious. It was a dumb, small thing, but it made the apartment feel like ours. I found the house in March. A 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood near Sloan's Lake, with a covered porch Melissa said she could picture decorating for Halloween. The landlord wanted a deposit of $3,200 to hold it while our application processed. I paid it from my own savings account, the one I'd built up over 4 years of overtime and careful budgeting. The lease, once approved, was going to be in my name, with Melissa listed as a co-tenant pending a credit review. That detail mattered more than I understood at the time. I also covered the application fees, the pet deposit for Melissa's cat, and I'd quietly agreed to pay her portion of the security deposit as a wedding gift, since her old debt was still weighing down her score. I didn't ask for anything in return. I just wanted us to have a place where we could actually start our life. Looking back, that was my flaw. I gave without ever checking whether the ground under us was solid. I trusted that being generous was the same thing as being safe. The betrayal started small, the way these things usually do. It was a Thursday night, 3 weeks after I paid the deposit. We were at her parents' house for dinner, her mother's usual Thursday spread, and her cousin Angela mentioned, almost casually, "So Derek's really moving to Denver? That's exciting." I remember setting my fork down slowly. "Derek who?" I asked. Melissa laughed it off. "Oh, it's nothing. He's just an old friend going through a rough patch. His lease fell through." Her mother nodded like this was already common knowledge in the family. I was the only person at that table who didn't know Derek existed in our lives at all that year. I let it go that night, because I didn't want to make a scene in front of her parents. That was mistake number 1. 2 days later, I asked her directly, "Why did Angela act like Derek moving here is old news?" Melissa's tone shifted immediately, defensive before I'd even accused her of anything. "He's been texting me for advice on apartments, that's all. You're being paranoid." I asked if she'd told him about our new house. She hesitated half a second too long. "I might have mentioned we found a place. It's not a secret, Ryan." Something about the way she said my name, flat and tired, made my stomach tighten. The following week, the leasing office called to confirm our application was almost finalized, pending the additional occupant's background check. I asked what additional occupant. The woman on the phone read the name off her screen, Derek Voss. She said Melissa had submitted the addendum online 3 days earlier, listing him as a temporary occupant in the 3rd bedroom, while he gets back on his feet. I stood in my own kitchen holding the phone, and for a second I couldn't make my mouth work. When I finally confronted Melissa that night, she didn't apologize. She crossed her arms and said, "It's just until he finds his own place. Family helps family, Ryan. You wouldn't understand, you don't have anyone who's ever needed you like that." Then she added the line I'd remember for a long time. "Derek's just easier to be around than you are right now." I asked what that meant. She wouldn't answer. She grabbed her keys and said she needed air, and she didn't come back until almost midnight. That night I didn't sleep in our bed. I took the couch, not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't lie next to her and pretend her words hadn't landed exactly where she aimed them. I stared at the ceiling, replaying "easier to be around," until the phrase stopped sounding like words and started sounding like a verdict. The next morning I drove to work without remembering a single turn I made. I sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside. At lunch I called my mom, and I couldn't even get through the story without my voice cracking. "Why does this feel like I'm the outsider in my own engagement?" I asked her. She didn't have an answer either. That weekend, I finally looked through our shared email, not hacking anything, just the household inbox we'd both used for years to manage bills and the leasing paperwork. Sitting in the sent folder was a message from Melissa to the leasing agent, dated a full 9 days before Angela's comment at dinner. It read, in part, that Derek would be a short-term occupant, and that she wanted to know if his name could be added without alerting the primary applicant, meaning me. She'd asked the leasing office to keep the addendum quiet until it was finalized. That wasn't an accident, that was a plan. Underneath it was a second email, this one to Derek himself, forwarded from a personal account. She'd told him the third bedroom should work out fine, and joked that Ryan doesn't even go in there anyway. My name reduced to a footnote in my own home before I'd even moved in. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I sat at the kitchen table and read both emails 4 times, and then I called the leasing office and withdrew my deposit request the following morning, the moment they opened. "I need to formally withdraw my application and my deposit hold," I told the agent. She asked if I understood I'd lose the $3,200 unless I canceled before the lease was signed. Luckily, we were still 2 days out from that deadline. I confirmed I understood completely. Then I asked her to remove Derek Voss from any pending paperwork tied to my name, since I was the sole party who'd paid the deposit and the sole applicant with an approved credit check. She said she'd note it immediately. I hung up and looked at the empty kitchen around me. "Easier to be around," I said out loud, to no one. "We'll see." Melissa found out that afternoon when the leasing office called her to confirm the cancellation. She called me 11 times in 90 minutes. When I finally picked up, she was already crying. "You didn't even talk to me first? You just pulled the plug on our house?" I told her I'd tried talking. I'd asked her directly, twice, and she'd chosen Derek's comfort over my questions both times. Her counterattack started that night, and didn't slow down for a week. She showed up at my office unannounced, asking the receptionist to page me like it was an emergency. She told her mother I'd sabotaged the wedding out of jealousy, and her mother called me twice, once in tears, once furious, accusing me of being controlling and small. Her cousin Angela posted something vague on social media about men who can't handle a woman having male friends, and half our mutual circle liked it before I'd said a single word publicly. Melissa swung between accusations and sudden softness. One night she left flowers on my car with a note that said she was sorry if I'd misunderstood. The next morning she texted that I'd humiliated her in front of the landlord, and that I owed her an apology for embarrassing the family. She never once said the word deposit without adding that I was being petty about money, as if $3,200 of my own savings wasn't something I had any right to protect. For a few days I actually wondered if I'd overreacted. Maybe Derek really was just a friend in a bad spot. Maybe I'd let one bad phrase spiral into something bigger than it deserved. That doubt lasted until my coworker Priya, the one person in my life who refused to just tell me what I wanted to hear, sat across from me at lunch and asked a question that reset everything. "Did she ever actually tell you about Derek moving here, or did you find out both times by accident?" I thought about it. Angela's comment, the leasing office's phone call, both times someone else told me first. Priya didn't say Melissa was wrong. She just said, "That's not a communication gap, Ryan. That's a pattern." So I stopped arguing on the phone and started building a timeline instead. I pulled the leasing office correspondence, all dated and time-stamped. I calculated exactly what I'd covered over the past 2 months, the $3,200 deposit, $600 in application and pet fees, and an additional $900 I'd quietly transferred to cover Melissa's share of the security deposit as a wedding gift she never knew the exact amount of. $4,700, entirely from my own account, for a lease that was never going to have my name on it as the only occupant I trusted. I called the bank to confirm the deposit hold could still be reversed before any funds were released to the landlord, since I'd canceled within the window. They confirmed it could. I also called a family law attorney a friend recommended. not to threaten Melissa with anything, but to understand where I actually stood, since we weren't married and everything financial up to that point had been mine alone. The attorney was blunt. If your name is the only one on the deposit and the lease application, you have every right to withdraw it. That's not revenge, that's ownership. I also learned something Melissa hadn't mentioned. Derek wasn't just an old friend with bad timing. According to a message Angela accidentally forwarded me instead of Melissa, a group chat screenshot meant for their side of the family, Melissa had told her cousins that Derek and I never really got along, and that having him around the house temporarily would sort itself out once Ryan calmed down. She'd been managing the story before I ever found out there was a story to manage. The confrontation happened 2 weeks later, at her parents' house, during what was supposed to be a family meeting to fix things. Her mother's words, not mine. Melissa sat beside her mom on the couch, and I sat across from them alone. She spoke first. She said I'd overreacted to a harmless favor for a friend, that I'd embarrassed her in front of the leasing office, and that I was punishing her for having compassion. Her mother nodded along, adding that family always finds a way to help each other, and that I should have been more understanding. I let her finish. Then I set my phone on the coffee table and read the email out loud, the one asking the leasing agent to add Derek without alerting the primary applicant. The room went quiet. Her mother's expression shifted first, from certainty to something closer to confusion. Melissa tried to interrupt, saying it was out of context. I asked her what context made "don't tell Ryan" mean something other than exactly what it said. Then I read the second message, the one to Derek, the one calling me someone who doesn't even go in there anyway. Angela, sitting in the corner, went completely silent and looked down at her hands. Melissa's mother didn't say anything else in her defense. Melissa's voice cracked. "I was going to tell you eventually, I just didn't want to fight before the wedding." I told her that wasn't honesty, that was a delay tactic dressed up as kindness. Then I said the line I'd been carrying since that first sleepless night on the couch. "You said Derek was easier to be around than me. Maybe that's because he never asked you to be honest about anything." She didn't have an answer for that. Nobody in that room did. I told her, calmly, that the deposit was gone and it wasn't coming back, that I wasn't going to fund a house where I was already an afterthought before we'd even moved the furniture in. I told her I needed real time apart to figure out whether we could rebuild trust at all, and that until then, the engagement was on hold. The practical results came quickly. Without my deposit or my credit backing the application, the landlord moved on to another tenant within the week. The house at Sloan's Lake, with the porch she'd wanted to decorate for Halloween, went to someone else entirely. Derek never moved to Denver in the end. Without a place lined up, he stayed with a friend back in Ohio instead. Melissa's mother, to her credit, called me a week later and admitted she'd taken her daughter's side too fast without asking enough questions, and she apologized for the things she'd said on the phone that first angry night. Melissa and I didn't get back together. We tried one round of couples counseling, mostly at her request, but it became clear in the second session that she still didn't fully understand why hiding Derek's presence had been the actual problem, not just the ex-boyfriend part of it. I moved into a smaller apartment on my own 2 months later, using what was left of my savings after the loss on the deposit. It wasn't the house with the porch, but it was mine, and nobody's name was on that lease who I hadn't personally chosen to trust. Looking back, I misunderstood what generosity was supposed to mean in a relationship. I thought paying for everything and asking for nothing made me a good partner. It actually meant I never noticed how one-sided the trust had become until an email accidentally told me the truth Melissa never planned to. My weakness wasn't loving her too much, it was mistaking my own silence for patience, and mistaking her silence for nothing at all. The deposit wasn't really about the money, it was the first time I refused to fund a version of my life I wasn't allowed to fully see. So, was I wrong for withdrawing my deposit the moment I found out, or should I have given her one more chance to explain before I made it final? Let me know your honest verdict in the comments, and subscribe if you want more real stories like this one.